When I was 16, my parents gave my room to my pregnant twin sister. They said it was time I learned to grow up, so I slept in a tent, outside, behind the kitchen window where they served cake and giggled over crib colors. That winter was long, but it started much earlier than December. My parents always told the story of how they prayed for a child. One child, a girl, if the Lord allowed it. Brianna arrived first, pink-faced, perfect lungs, strong enough to make the nurse laugh. I came 4 minutes later, quieter, smaller, unplanned. They didn't tell that part, they just called me the bonus, the unexpected, the extra. When people saw us together, they'd say things like, twins. Oh, but they're so different. And my mother would smile and reply, yes, Brianna takes after me. That was her way of saying, this one belongs. That one, not so much. It wasn't just the words. It was in the way they dressed her in new clothes from the department store while I wore hand-me-downs from church rummage sales, in the way her name was always embroidered on things, pillowcases, backpacks, even Christmas stockings, and mine was sharpied on the tag. Brianna had tea parties and dance recitals. I had chores. They said I was more practical, like that was praise. But when you're 7, no one wants to be practical. You just want to be seen. I remember one Thanksgiving, she got a seat at the big table with the adults I was told to help Aunt Marla in the kitchen. That was the year I burned the sweet potatoes and got scolded, while Brianna was complimented on how nicely she folded her napkin. My father once said to me while fixing the gutter, "You're the kind of girl who'll get by just fine. You don't need all that praise stuff," but the way he said it made it sound like a consolation prize. The only person who ever spoke to me like I mattered was Grandpa James. He taught me how to bait a hook, how to change a tire, how to hold still when the world gets too loud. He'd say, "You've got more spine than the whole family combined, Claire. But you keep it quiet. That's power." I didn't always believe him, but I clung to his words like rope. He died when I was 14. After that, nobody called me Steel Girl anymore, not even in jest. A year later, they sent out a holiday card. Brianna stood between our parents holding a sonogram. Matching sweaters, matching smiles. I wasn't in the photo. But if you looked closely, bottom right behind the porch column, you'd see it, a blur of denim and a bent elbow, just enough to say, "We didn't forget you, we just framed you out." I was 16 when they told me, "Mom, Linda." Though I stopped calling her that out loud sometime around 12, stood in the hallway with a mug of decaf and that pinched smile she wore when she was about to say something she already knew you wouldn't like. She'd started using it on me more in those years, like she'd grown allergic to my presence, but didn't want to be impolite about it. "Claire," she said, "we've got news." Behind her, my father, Tom, leaned against the stair banister, arms folded like he was waiting for a sermon to end. He didn't speak, not yet. That was Linda's job. He just hovered the punctuation mark at the end of her sentences. "Brianna's expecting." I already knew the test in the bathroom trash, the secretive whispers on the landline, the way she touched her belly after dinner like she was waiting for music to start. It had all been there, I just hadn't said it aloud. Unlike them, I still believed some things deserved silence. "That's a lot," I said carefully. Linda waved the air like she was dismissing a mosquito. "It's a blessing, Claire." "She's 17, sure, but she's ready. They're getting married. Tom's calling the pastor this week." Tom nodded once as if to confirm that yes, the church basement was already booked, and no, my opinion wasn't required. Then came the part that mattered. "With the baby coming, we'll need space. Your room is the only one close to the bathroom." "It makes sense." I stared at her. "What do you mean? You'll need to pack up," she said. "We'll move your things into the garage for now." "The garage," I said, like I hadn't heard her. "There's no insulation. It smells like fertilizer." She tilted her head like I was being unreasonable. "You're old enough to manage. We've let you stay longer than most parents would. You know, let me stay." As if my existence was a favor they'd extended past its due date. Brianna walked past at that moment, glowing like a lighthouse in one of Dad's old flannel shirts. She paused in the hallway, eyes wide and performative. "You're not mad, are you? I mean, the baby's going to need a lot." She looked at me like I was supposed to say, "Of course not," and maybe cry or smile or hug her. Instead, I turned, walked up the stairs, and started packing. That night, I moved into the backyard, not the garage they'd filled it with boxes for the baby shower. So I found the old tent from summer camp patched to tear with duct tape and set it up under the elm tree. The nights in Georgia are quiet in winter, but not silent. The wind has opinions. The house still laughed. Through the frost-bitten flap of nylon, I could see their kitchen lights. They passed casseroles back and forth like love letters, set up balloons, hung baby socks from string. No one looked outside. They gave me a tent so she could have a crib. What were they planning to give me if I stayed? The tent lasted 19 nights. By the end of week 3, my fingers cracked even when wrapped in gloves, and my homework pages curled from condensation. I still went to school, still brushed my teeth at the gym locker room, still told anyone who asked that I was just camping out for a bit until our cousins left town. No one asked twice. During the day, I walked. I couldn't stay in the yard, not with Linda constantly peeking out to make sure I didn't track mud near the patio. So I wandered the sidewalks, circling the square, stopping at the library when it opened. That's how I passed the bakery. It wasn't fancy. The window paint was chipped and the neon, open, flickered like it had a stutter, but the smell, warm sugar-burnt cinnamon rising dough, hit me in the chest like a memory from a better life. I stood outside longer than I meant to, watching the man behind the counter mop the floor with slow, even strokes. He noticed, opened the door with one hand still gripping the mop. "You just window shopping?" he asked. "Or you lost?" I hesitated, then said, "Neither. I was just walking." He looked me over, not in a cruel way, just observant. I must have looked terrible. Oversized, hoodie split lip, the kind of face that flinches before anyone raises their voice. "You hungry?" I nodded. He motioned me in, wiped his hands on his apron. "Frank Delaney, owner, janitor, baker, hostage negotiator. You can sweep." I nodded again, then grabbed that broom. There was no speech about helping the less fortunate. No questions about why I looked like I hadn't slept in a bed in weeks. Just a broom, a cloth, and a simple instruction mop, front to back, never side to side. I worked every afternoon that week. Quietly, Frank didn't talk much, but when he did, it was plain useful. How to check yeast by smell. How to watch a customer's face to see if they liked what they were chewing. By Friday, he handed me a key. I got a cot upstairs. It's next to the sugar sacks and the window doesn't open. But it's warm and the roof doesn't leak. If you want it, I took it. The bed frame creaked. The mattress was thin, but it was the first night I didn't hear Brianna laughing through the kitchen wall. The first night I wasn't cold. And the first night in a long time I didn't feel like I was trespassing inside my own life. I stayed above the bakery for nearly 4 years. At first, it was just a cot and a shelf where I kept my books and my backpack. But Frank never asked me to leave, and I never gave him a reason to. I worked every morning before school and every evening after I learned how to braid dough, when to pull a pie before the crust lied to you, how to stretch your hands without breaking the gluten. Frank never wasted words, but when I messed up, he'd grunt and show me again. That was his way of saying, "You're not hopeless." I finished high school early, not because anyone pushed me, but because I wanted out of everything that came before. No prom, no senior trip, no pictures in the yearbook. Just a signature from the principal and a bus ride back to the bakery where Frank handed me a warm roll and said, "You're gonna need a suit for job interviews." He didn't offer to buy it. He just said it like fact, like weather. I enrolled in night classes at the community college. Accounting first, then small business law, then supply chain. I worked mornings at the bakery, evenings at a diner, and weekends doing books for a friend of Frank's who owned a hardware store. I didn't have time for anything else. I didn't want anything else. By the time I turned 25, I had 3 certificates, 1 business license, and no debt. Frank offered to retire and sign over the bakery, but I said no. He earned that place. Instead, I saved every dollar. No vacations, no takeout, no nonsense. I lived like I was still in that tent behind the house because part of me believed if I stopped, they'd find me again, that someone would tap me on the shoulder and say, "This isn't yours, you're just borrowing it." But I kept saving. At 29, I bought the house. 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, nothing fancy. The porch leaned left, the floor creaked, the kitchen hadn't seen a working stove since the Bush administration, but it had walls and a deed and my name on it. Not, Frank's not. Tom's not, Linda's mine. I moved in alone with a mattress on the floor and 2 folding chairs from the bakery's back room. I ate dinner off a cardboard box and hung one thing on the wall, a photo of me and Grandpa James taken the summer before he died. He was squinting at the sun. I was holding a fishing rod too big for my hands, he'd told me once. One day you'll build something nobody can take from you. So I did, and I didn't tell anyone. It came on a Tuesday. I was sanding the windowsill in the front room when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Frank never dropped by unannounced, and the mailman left things in the box. Most people texted first or didn't come at all. The doorbell rang again, longer this time, impatient. I wiped my hands on my jeans, walked down the hall, and opened the door. There they were. Linda, Tom, Brianna, her husband, 3 kids, matching shirts. Linda was holding a Tupperware, the kind she used to deliver to church potlucks when I was 10. "Claire," she said brightly, as if this was the most natural thing in the world. "We heard you bought a house. We're so proud of you." Tom gave a stiff nod, then looked past me into the hallway like he was checking the condition of a rental. Brianna smiled wide and stepped forward, her baby on one hip, the other 2 clinging to her skirt. "This place looks so good. You've really done well for yourself." I didn't move from the doorway. Linda lifted the Tupperware. "We brought banana pudding. Thought we could catch up." "Catch up," I repeated. She laughed like I'd made a joke. "It's been too long, sweetheart. We've all missed you." I said nothing. The hallway behind me was still half-painted. I could hear the fan running upstairs. A grocery bag sat on the counter with eggs and milk I hadn't yet put away. Tom cleared his throat. "Brianna's family's getting bigger. They're a bit tight on space right now. We were thinking." "We thought," Linda interrupted, smoothing her blouse, "that maybe it's time to let the past go. Start fresh. You've got all this room now, and well, family should be together," Brianna chimed in. "I mean, we could all help each other. Wouldn't that be nice?" I looked at their faces, smiling, expectant. And then I looked at the shoes on their feet. New clean, the shoes of people who hadn't walked through snow to get to school, who hadn't mopped bakery floors before sunrise or slept on sugar sacks while pretending it was a mattress. "I lived in a tent," I said quietly, "in your backyard." The smiles faltered just a little. "You knew," I said to Tom. "You saw me through the kitchen window." He didn't answer. "And now you want to live here? Like none of it happened." Linda's voice sharpened. "Claire, don't be dramatic. That was years ago." "You're right," I said. "It was." I stepped back and opened the door wider, not to let them in, to let them see. The bare walls, the scuffed floor, the quiet space I'd built without them. "You should go, Claire," Linda began. "We're trying to do what I said. Rewrite it." Brianna shifted the baby on her hip. "You don't have to be bitter." I almost laughed, but instead, I shut the door, not slammed, not with anger, just closed, firm. A banana pudding sat on my porch for 3 days. I left it there. Let the sun have it. 2 weeks after they showed up at my door, a letter arrived from a local attorney's office. I stood on my porch in the morning light, coffee cooling in my hand, reading and rereading the first line. This letter serves as formal notice of a legal petition filed by the Matheson family requesting shared claim to the residential property located at 144 Oak Lane. I sat down on the steps, let the paper curl in the breeze. The legal language was cold, efficient. They weren't asking to be part of my life. They were asking for a piece of what I'd built on paper. They were suing me for my house. The next morning, I called Adele Watkins. Frank had given me her name years ago, told me, if anything ever gets ugly, she's the one you want. She was older, sharp-eyed, and didn't waste time. I met her in a small office above a notary shop that smelled like lemon cleaner and paper dust. She read the letter once, then again, slower. "They're claiming this was purchased with family money," she said. "It wasn't." "You sure?" I nodded. I worked for every dollar. No gifts, no loans, nothing in writing or in spirit. Adele looked at me for a long moment. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out a legal pad, and started asking questions. Birth dates, prior addresses, any known inheritance or assets. When she asked about my grandfather, I told her everything I remembered. The fishing trips the old van he used to take us to the lake. The tin box he kept locked in his closet that I was never allowed to touch. Was there a will? "I don't know," I said. "He died when I was 14. They told me he left everything to my parents." Adele leaned back, fingers pressed together. "Let me look into it." She called me 4 days later and told me to come in. When I arrived, she had a thin folder on the table and a look I'd seen before on Frank's face the night he found me sleeping behind the flour sacks. There was a will, she said. It had been filed quietly under an outdated name, James F. Matheson Sr., with a restricted access code that Adele had requested through probate court. It listed one beneficiary, Claire Elizabeth Matheson. The date was 9 months before his death. He left you everything she said, a modest trust, real estate stock, his war pension. I stared at the folder, but I never saw a dime. No, because your parents petitioned for temporary guardianship and assumed fiduciary control. You were a minor. They liquidated the assets and declared them absorbed into household debt. They spent it. She nodded. All of it. Most notably, 6 months after the liquidation, your sister's wedding was paid in full. Your parents purchased a new SUV and they refinanced their mortgage. I didn't say anything. Adele closed the folder. You have a case. Will it hold, with documentation? Yes, but it won't be pleasant. I don't need pleasant. She paused. You want to go after them? No, I said. I want what was mine. She nodded slowly, slid the folder toward me. They might not have thought you'd find out. I ran my hand across the cover. They thought I'd stay in the tent. The courtroom wasn't large, just a few pew-like benches, scuffed floors, and a judge who looked like she'd heard every kind of family lie already. I sat at the plaintiff's table with Adele beside me, calm as stone. Across from us were Linda and Tom, dressed like it was Sunday service, and Brianna, who looked everywhere but at me. Her husband sat behind them, chewing on his nails. The judge called the hearing to order. The petition for shared property rights was read aloud in monotone legal cadence, on the grounds that the defendant's current residence was acquired using liquidated family assets belonging to the estate of James F. Matheson Sr. That was the first time they said Grandpa's name out loud in that room. Tom flinched. Adele stood. Her voice was measured crisp. Your Honor, we submit into evidence the last will and testament of James F. Matheson, Sr., dated 9 months prior to his death, naming Claire Elizabeth Matheson as sole beneficiary of all liquid and assigned assets. She handed the folder to the bailiff. Further documentation will show the estate was appropriated by the petitioners during the defendant's minority, with funds traced to the purchase of a vehicle home, renovations and event expenses for Brianna Ann, Matheson's wedding. Linda leaned forward. That money was for the family. Claire was part of the household. We didn't steal it. Adele didn't blink. Claire was a minor, she was not consulted, and she never received notification of her legal inheritance. The judge flipped through the folder. Her brow furrowed once slightly. Tom spoke for the first time. We were told it was joint, that we were the executors. You filed as temporary guardians, Adele said, but you never disclosed the will's existence to the beneficiary. That's fraud. Brianna finally looked at me then. Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I didn't speak. I had nothing left to say to people who once looked through me like frost on a window. The judge closed the folder and looked at Linda. Did you inform your daughter of her legal right to this trust when she turned 18? Linda didn't answer. The judge turned to me. Miss Matheson, do you wish to file a counterclaim? I nodded. Once I do. A pause. Then. This court finds in favor of the defendant. All property rights remain solely with Miss Matheson. Restitution proceedings will begin within 30 days. The gavel came down like a door closing. Not slammed, just final. As we stood, Linda reached for my arm. I stepped back. Claire, she whispered, we were just trying to do what's right for Brianna. I looked at her. You did. Then I walked out and didn't turn around. The house was quiet when I got back. I locked the door behind me and slipped off my shoes, like I always did, even though there was no one left to track in mud. The late afternoon light spilled across the floorboards, catching the edges of unfinished trim and the slight tilt in the hallway. Imperfections I'd memorized, chosen. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Like a storm had passed without knocking anything over, just shifting the air and making everything sharper. Restitution would take months. Adele would handle the filings. I'd get some of the money back, though, not all. But it wasn't about the money. It never had been. I opened the closet in the front hall and pulled out a small cardboard box labeled Grandpa. Keep inside was the only thing I'd saved from the old house. Besides my birth certificate, a photo of Grandpa James and me taken when I was 8. We were standing in front of his truck, both squinting into the sun. He had one hand on my shoulder and the other holding a tackle box. I took the photo and walked to the living room. Above the fireplace was a nail I'd never used. I hadn't wanted to hang anything until I knew the house was truly mine. Now I did. I placed the frame carefully, stepped back. Then I reached into the box again and pulled out something smaller. His old Navy dog tag, the one he used to wear like a keychain. I set it on the mantel beside the photo, then slid a small brass plate beneath it, something I'd had engraved weeks earlier before the hearing, before the paperwork. It read, "This house was built from silence, not from love, and that is enough." I didn't cry. There was nothing to mourn. They had taught me absence. They'd shown me how to vanish from photographs, how to go unnoticed at a table, how to live at the edges of a family without making a sound. And I had learned so well. I rebuilt a life from it. Later that night, I turned off my phone. I didn't need to read the messages. I knew what they'd say. Regret, guilt, twisted apologies wrapped in blame. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the wind move through the trees in the front yard. I wasn't waiting. No one was coming, but for the first time in years, I could finally hear myself breathing.